The moment Caitlin Clark publicly aligned herself with a clear priority, the internal dynamics of the Indiana Fever began to shift in a significant way. What followed wasn't a controlled, front office-driven narrative, but a more organic and increasingly visible response from within the locker room. As tensions around the evolving salary structure and roster decisions intensified, players appeared more willing to voice their perspectives directly, rather than relying on traditional media channels' organizational messaging. The WNBA offseason is inherently complex, shaped by negotiations, market value, and long-term roster strategy. Within that environment, Clark's public endorsement of Kelsey Mitchell as a top priority carried weight, not just symbolically, but in terms of perceived influence. When a player with that level of visibility makes a definitive statement, it can subtly alter expectations, shift leverage, and create ripple effect across both the locker room and the broader league conversation.
And Clark came out and said that Kelsey Mitchell is the top priority for the Indiana Fever in this free agency. And that left some questions in the air about, wait a minute, how much of a priority is Lexie Hall? How much of a priority?
If you strip away the rhetoric and look at it like a cap sheet exercise, the ripple effect is more about signaling than strategic violence. When Caitlin Clark publicly elevates Kelsey Mitchell as a priority, it sends a clear message about how the Indiana Fever might allocate future resources, but it doesn't lock the books or eliminate flexibility. WNBA roster construction still allow for multiple paths, staggered contracts, role-based deals, and value signings around core players. For role players like Lexie and Sophie Cunningham, their value isn't purely tied to scoring volume or headline contracts. Defensive versatility, lineup fit, durability, and decision-making often translate into strong market demand, even if that doesn't always mean max-level salaries. Teams across the league consistently pay for players who can defend, space the floor, and complement high-usage stars. So rather than a collapse or betrayal, the more grounded interpretation is this. Clark's statement helps define a potential core, while everyone else's valuation remains fluid and dependent on performance, health, and how well they fit into evolving team systems.
With the Fever has ended, and she is now an unrestricted free agent ahead of her 8th season in the WNBA. And you also have to remember that Sophie Cunningham will likely be left unprotected in the expansion draft. So that is another
Listen carefully to the cold, unforgiving financial reality embedded in this projection. Strip away emotion and view this strictly as a high-stakes business transaction. Sophie Cunningham delivered a solid statistical campaign, 8.6 points per game and 1.7 made threes, functioning as an efficient perimeter contributor. But that momentum was abruptly halted after 30 games by a significant torn MCL in her right knee. In a hyper-efficient, cap-constrained league like the WNBA, organizations do not allocate long-term capital to assets carrying active medical risk. The Indiana Fever are bound by strict roster protection rules. Only 5 core assets can be secured. That rigid structure leaves a recovering Cunningham fully exposed as an unrestricted free agent, vulnerable to acquisition by expansion franchises with available capital. This is not emotional, it's mathematical. The front office is signaling, in purely clinical terms, that she is expendable within their current valuation model. However, Cunningham is not operating from a position of ignorance. She understands a modern leverage economy. With a strong personal brand and digital reach, she is no longer confined to traditional team-controlled narratives. Instead, she is actively positioning herself as an independent asset, one capable of converting visibility, marketability, and external demand into negotiating power beyond the limits of a single franchise.
Declared after they introduced Hull as their special guest.
Our guest today is a professional basketball player, currently in the WNBA. She first made her name as a standout college athlete. Off the court, she's a fan favorite for her leadership and the way she represents the next generation of women's basketball.
Love that.
She's also a guard for the...
I step back and evaluate the corporate scale of this media activation with precision. Sophie Cunningham is not operating within the traditional, tightly controlled communication structure of the Indiana Fever. She has deliberately stepped outside of it. By leveraging her independently funded, sponsor-backed podcast platform alongside co-host Wes Wilson, she is reclaiming direct control over messaging, timing, and audience reach, the launch of the limited series live from the bracket is not accidental. It's a calculated alignment with the peak attention cycle of March Madness, allowing her to tap into an already amplified media ecosystem. Layer on top of that the announcement that fellow unrestricted free agent Lexie will appear on the Show Me Something podcast, and the move becomes even more strategic. This is not casual conversation, it's controlled narrative engineering. Two players, both navigating free agency, are positioning themselves in front of a large, engaged audience to frame their own value propositions in real time. In doing so, they bypass the traditional gatekeepers, front office executives, PR teams, and even mainstream media intermediaries. For team leadership, this kind of unfiltered platform introduces volatility. Front offices typically prefer tightly managed messaging during negotiation windows to preserve leverage and flexibility. By contrast, Cunningham and Hull are accelerating the timeline, publicly shaping perception, signaling confidence, and potentially influencing market dynamics before formal offers are even tabled. What you're seeing is not chaos, it's a shift in power. Players with independent media infrastructure are no longer just participants in the system. They are active negotiators in the public arena, capable of influencing both fan sentiment and organizational pressure in ways that didn't exist a decade ago.
Going on, how y'all feeling? I mean, the CBA is done. Okay, that was a long, tumultuous road. But what are you guys looking for in free agency is something I would like to know, and I'm hoping they address that. Are y'all looking for the money? Are y'all looking for, to stay where you are?
Entirely left behind in the dust. Rewriting this paragraph here is a cleaner, more structured rewrite of your paragraph while preserving the intensity and core argument. Listen carefully to the urgency and aggressive leverage embedded in that segment. The underlying question is simple. Are these players now pursuing maximum guaranteed capital in the open market, even if it means walking away from the Caitlin Clark-driven ecosystem that elevated their value? This situation puts the Indiana Fever front office under extreme pressure. Lexie and Sophie Cunningham are no longer minimum-level assets, but retaining both alongside a supermax commitment to Kelsey Mitchell creates a serious cap allocation problem. Overcommit financially, and you risk building a top-heavy, fatigued roster that lacks the depth to survive a playoff at UN.AT the same time. This media push carries a dangerous assumption. Do Hull and Cunningham truly have independent, global brand power? Or is their current valuation largely tied to their proximity to Caitlin Clark's economic gravity? The evidence suggests their exposure, sponsorships, and visibility are heavily amplified by that environment. If they test the open market and leave that ecosystem, there's a real possibility their market value corrects sharply. Not because they lack talent, but because the context that inflated their brand disappears. Meanwhile, expansion franchises like Portland and Toronto are in a completely different financial position. With clean cap sheets and aggressive ownership groups, they have the flexibility to overpay strategically, not just acquire talent, but to weaken competitors like Indiana. This is a new WNBA landscape. Less about loyalty and chemistry, more about leverage, timing, and capital extraction. The Fever front office now faces a critical decision. Stay disciplined and protect long-term flexibility, or react to external pressure and risk destabilizing their entire cap structure. At its core, this isn't just about two players. It's a stress test of organizational discipline in a rapidly professionalizing, capital-driven league. If you want, I can also tighten this into a sharper YouTube script style or make it even more analytical with actual salary cap projections.